So this is a piece of splint material, and I just wanted to show you how I normally cut it out. Now, if you're using perforated material like I usually try to cut right onto the perforated holes, because what happens then is whatever you're cutting already has a jagged edge. And if you're cutting through the holes have a jagged edge, and you know you're going to trim the splint material anyway, so it's a perfect place to cut to make sure that you conserve how much splint material you have so you can make your splint. Now, for example, if you come up close, if you cut right in between, right, and then you're trimming, you're going to trim, and you might trim into the holes, which then means you're going to trim even more. You're going to keep trimming, and your splint's going to be like this thin. So if you give yourself a little space and you cut right where the perforated holes are, then it just gives you room. So that's one of the things I do. Now, the trick here, and you can see that this is not a whole sheet, I've done it to this side. Now, one of the things is if you're starting with a whole new sheet, if you take a look on the corner and you sort of like shimmy it in the light, you can see, oh, what kind of splint material this is. You can see if you put it here, you're gonna see that this is Taylor splint material. Now, it's gonna have it on the corners. So it's gonna have it on one corner, and then it's gonna have it on the opposite end of the other corner. It tends to be on the corners of one side. So if you're using a sheet and you're sharing with a big group of people, like you're in a department and stuff, and you have different types of material that maybe look the same, you wanna make sure that you don't cut that part off and then leave this part with no labels, because then people who don't splint that much may not know what kind of material is left. So I always recommend cutting from where you cut from before, so that you can leave that little label on there. Now, obviously, I work in a small clinic, and we know what materials we use, so for us, it really, it doesn't really matter. But when you're cutting a thick piece of splint material, you need to have a box cutter. Do not cut. Let me close this so you don't see my messy cabinet. It's not messy, it's just full. You don't want to cut it with splint material because it's really, really hard. And over time, you're going to just mess with your thumbs. And we know that our thumbs do 50% of the work of our hands, so we can't really mess it up. So this is what I would recommend. Use a box cutter. Get to the edge of the table, right? So wherever I want to cut, so I'm going to cut right here along the perforated holes. I can score it, but you see how I'm hanging off the edge? First of all, don't cut into the table. Nobody's gonna like that. Not nice. So I'll score and I'll say, okay, this is generally the amount of the size that I need, right? So that's what I'm gonna cut. Now, you can measure it out, the width of your splint. Like, let's say you have somebody who's a little bit bigger, you need a little bit more space. If you have someone who's really, really thin, you can go with a smaller piece. But for our purposes and demonstration, I normally use a certain size so that it gives you room to kind of trim down, make any mistakes, so that you're still going to have a great orthosis at the end. So I score it, I have it on the edge, and then now I'm going to go and I'm going to cut and I'm going to press down even more. I'm going to go along the scored what I already scored, if I can, right? And you can go through that as many times as possible, right? I just usually go over it twice, and then I'm gonna take the material and I'm gonna bend it, and it's just gonna make it easier for me. So I'm gonna bend it, and then I'm gonna go and I'm gonna cut it again. But because I bent it, it's made like this little groove for me, so that it's easy for me to cut. All right, so I'm gonna go and it just cuts it more. And now I'm gonna go in the opposite direction. All right, usually the ends are a little stuck in, but you can just pull it off or you can cut it off. And that's how you can cut a piece of splint material away without killing your hands. I'm a huge fan of protecting your hands because as therapists, we use our hands all day, every day with our patients and clients, but we use it in our everyday lives too. So everything that you do, you've got to think, how do I protect my hands for the long run and longevity? So that took very little effort, and I got a nice big piece of material out, and I'm gonna cut it in half. So just for our purposes here, how am I gonna, I'm gonna cut right down the middle. I'm gonna do that again for you. I scored it. I'm gonna go through it again. Usually the ends are a little bit tougher, right? So I'm gonna go score it twice, 3 times, bend it, and you can go ahead and cut through it one more time, and then flip it over, and it just snaps. Look at that, perfectly in half. Woo. If you have someone with a longer arm, obviously you're gonna make the splint so it's a little bit longer. Let's say you have someone with a really long forearm, you might cut it like over here to give you a little bit extra space, and then you'll save this piece for another splint. Ta-da! That's it. Boom!